Welcome to Stars Matter, a recruiting podcast from The Athletic. I'm Mitch Light. I'm joined by Ari Wasserman, national college football reporter. Ari's going to dive into the big A1 story, what we call A1 story at The Athletic. Might not mean much to the listeners, but a big recruiting project that I was involved with Ari and David Ubbin. Some good numbers there. So, Ari, how you doing today, buddy?
Yeah, it was super fun to work on that story with you guys, and I can't wait to dive into it.
And we got Manny Navarro, who is our University of Miami Hurricanes beat reporter and a recruiting reporter, Miami-based, but national recruiting writer as well. And in a little bit, Manny, we're going to get to the Hurricanes' recent run of 3-star commitments, which you wrote about in part in The Athletic. So how you doing today?
Doing great. Mario really, I think, wants to improve Miami's 3-star numbers. He saw they weren't in the top 10%, so he's getting to it.
Yeah, we must have leaked that to him before these commitments. And then we got Grace Rayner, who is national recruiting writer for The Athletic as well. And Grace has been on kind of commitment watch. Had a big South Carolina commitment the other day, although they got two more yesterday, and then wrote about Gage Ginther, the number 1 player in Colorado, who said no to Deion Sanders and signed with the Tennessee Volunteers. So we'll talk about that in a bit. But Grace, how's it going?
It's going good. It's good to see all of y'all.
I'm glad Grace was able to read the clock today. We have got some confusion. It's very confusing. We've got 3 of us, 2 of us in Central Time, a couple of us in Eastern Time. So Grace, I'm very proud of you for figuring this out.
I was right in the middle of doing a bunch of math, which, as you know, numbers are a little dicey for me sometimes. So I think my brain is a little overloaded, and I didn't know how to read our clocks.
We're all here, so we're going to talk about all that stuff. A bunch of commitments, I guess, guys, because there were some spring games last week. Seems like there were more commitments and probably be some more this weekend. But first, I wanted to talk about a new NCAA rule. There was a bunch of rules, recruiting rules changed. A lot to the calendar that don't really affect the fan, just dead periods, bump rules, and stuff like that. But one that caught everyone's attention, and there's some misinformation out on social media when this broke last week, that prospects are allowed to now take more than 5 official visits. And Manny, you've been doing this a long time. 5's been the magic number for seemingly forever, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the way everybody has sort of operated, right, for years and years and years. Although I would say, obviously, what's changed has been the calendar, because everybody used to wait till November and December, right, to do those trips. And now it feels like all the elite guys are just doing it in May and in June and getting it over with fast. So yeah, I think, but it's always been 5.
Yeah, so I thought so. But the key is, and people were going on social media, on Twitter, saying, oh, that's, it's going to be so expensive, all these visits now, these schools are going to have to pay for. But it's still capped at 56 from the school standpoint. So schools are still in a recruiting cycle can have 56 official visits. So that puts a lot more onus on the schools, to a balancing act there. Kids can now go on more. 5 leagues seem like a good number. And Grace, to me, this just seemed like it's going to be a pain in the ass for the schools and the recruiting staffs. I know you've talked to, or you reached out to a few. Is that kind of the vibe you got?
Yeah, I reached out to a couple when the first recommendations came through, not the official visits, just the calendar tweaks and all that good stuff. And I thought one of the interesting things I heard back was that it just doesn't really sound like the NCAA has a lot of like football / recruiting people on these committees, like the ones actually tasked with making these rules. And so I was laughing with a couple of them about how, like, the first legislation I think wanted to improve coaches like work-life balance, and I don't think that happened. And then with the visits, I thought the most interesting point I heard about that was that maybe this was just a hypothesis from one recruiting coordinator that I talked to, that maybe it felt like the NCAA was saying that they couldn't track the kids taking their 5 officials, when in reality it would be really easy for them to do if it was just a little more organized and they went through the eligibility center. So yeah, I mean, and we talked about this a little bit off air, like our schools in cool cities going to have to be a little more diligent now. If a 5-star wants to go to a cool city. So yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be, we know it, having talked to recruiting staffers, how exhausted they are in June already. And I think it's about to just be totally overloaded for them.
All right, that floored me, that what Grace just said when she told me earlier that the NCAA wasn't tracking these. Like, so are kids able to take 7 and they just don't tell anyone? It seems like everyone knows now, because if you go to a kid's profile on the recruiting sites, it tells the dates of their official visits. So that one kind of surprised me.
Yeah, I think what is going to be interesting about this rule change is that I wonder if some of the bigger time programs that are more accustomed to getting 5-star prospects on campus are going to start telling lower tier prospects no more often. Because you don't hear very often that schools are turning down visits. But if big time program altering players want to take more than 5 official visits, then that takes away 1 official from every 3-star, 4-star that might have come on campus. So I wonder if, like, in a year from now, we're going to be writing stories about, well, they fell off my board once they declined my official visit request. Because if everybody's going to want to take one, there's going to be more requests to take the visits than allotted spots when you add up those two things, right? More kids are going to want to go to more places, but schools are still confined to the same total number. So you're going to have a higher demand for it, which means there's going to be some decisions to make. So I'm very curious to see how that pans out. And I'm also curious to see if there's a different or a more crazy environment when it comes to results. Like, our players that would not have taken an official visit to a place because they weren't taking it seriously before going to be like, what the hell do I care? I'm going to go now that it's more than 5, see something that they like that they never would have seen in the past, and commit to an unparalleled rate to different new schools. So, yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like it's going to be that big of a difference from the school standpoint, but I wonder if the results and how kids are handled is going to change.
Yeah, one theory I heard was that it could help some non-elite programs, and guys, feel free to disagree with this. I think there's merit to it to some degree. Let's say you're a top 100 kid and you take 5 visits in June, and you've gone to the usual suspects, Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama, all that, and then you don't commit, and then you go on, maybe you get hurt, or you get passed on some boards, or school takes a running back and you're a running back, and then December comes, you've taken your 5 official visits, you're not really feeling the love from those elite schools anymore, but you got in the old calendar, you have no more visits. Now you can go out and see another school. And if you're like, I don't know, a Georgia Tech or someone like that, you can bring them in. And where in the past, it'd have to be unofficial visits. So, maybe it helps kids find some other places like that. Manny, you think there's any credence to that?
My feeling on this, guys, and I've been doing this a long time, I don't remember kids taking as many visits as they do now anyway, right? Like,
Right.
Jeremiah Smith was up at the spring game at Ohio State this past weekend. He was down in Orlando for the OT7. These kids, it feels like they all have American Express black cards, and they just have endless amounts of money to go to as many schools as they want. So while I understand it's a rule change, I don't know that anybody's really adhering to this anyway, because obviously somebody's got to be funding all these unofficial visits all over the country. And my guess, it's not the parents. It's boosters and other people involved in this process. So I'm interested to see what kind of effect it honestly has, but I don't think it will have much, because in the end, if a school wants you to come see them, they're going to figure out a way
Figure it
to
out.
get
Yeah.
Yeah. And for listeners, if you might not know, the main difference is an official above and beyond like the transportation, the plane ticket. When you're on an official visit, you stay in a hotel, you can go out to a fancy dinner legally or by the rules. On an unofficial visit, you go to practice, you can meet with the coaches, but like you have to buy your own lunch and all that stuff. So I mean, they can roll out the red carpet more on an official visit. But I agree with Manny. Yeah,
spent $300,000 on Arch Manning's official visit weekend. So, just in case you guys were wondering,
by the way, I have
The Athletic.
I have a friend of a friend. Well, I was talking to someone that referenced that story, and I don't even know if they knew I worked at The Athletic, and said, yeah, I was talking to Texas, and they saw that story, and they kind of chuckled. They said, that's actually kind of low. So we might have missed a few things.
Well, I was hanging out with Sam Kahn over the weekend at the Elite 11 Regional in Austin, and when I went to book my travel, I don't know if there was something happening there this weekend, if there was one of the 9,000 rodeos that happened in the state, or race car driving, or is Taylor Swift in town? I don't know, but like a Fairfield Inn was like $700 this weekend.
Whoa.
Like in the city limits. And Sam made this point too. It's like everybody likes to make fun of Texas for how much money they spent on that visit, but also Austin is a incredibly expensive place to travel to.
Yeah.
So like, it's like if you racked up $300,000 in Lincoln, Nebraska, like it would be a completely different experience. But with the hotels, like the JW Marriott downtown in Austin is usually $1,100 a night. When you have all the family members, because you can bring 4 or 5 family members with you. I think it's 4, to 4.
It used to be 2. I think maybe it's 4 now. But
multiple hotel rooms, and parents like to get after it at the pool bar. I mean, it could get out of hand pretty quickly. So, yeah, that's an interesting point, Manny. It's like, how many 5-star prospects now are like, well, I wanted to see Washington, but I can't afford it. Like, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Is that your 5-star
end
voice
up on campus? They all just end up there,
right? Yeah.
But also too, like if a school's like, hey, we're gonna pay for everything, just come.
right?
And you've already taken 5, like you just might be open to going to a place that you wouldn't have otherwise gone through the trouble of finding a way to get to. Like Wyoming, I'd go visit Wyoming.
Yeah, all these visits stress me out though. Like what Manny said, like these kids just stay home one weekend, like hang out. So they're all over. Deuce Robinson, Grace, you wrote that story on Deuce, and he was just literally like every week he was somewhere new. And his dad's like, yeah, he wants to go visit Oregon. He's like, well, he's got games on the weekends. We're like, when's he gonna go? He's like, we'll figure it out. But well, Ari, I want to transition because you were at the Elite 11 camp in Austin. Ari fell in love with the quarterback there. And Ari usually is attracted
I found love in a hopeless place.
I get these calls from Ari. He's like, I'm at Elite 11. There's this 5-star. He's the best. He does this so well. Ari fell in love with just a 3-star quarterback at the Elite 11 regional camp. Just a regional camp, not the finals. Hoss Haney, a 3-star from Fort Worth, formerly committed to Duke, has a really interesting story. Ari wrote a great story about him. I think it ran Monday. Ari, tell us about your
It did. You were editing it at midnight on Sunday, remember?
Yeah, yes. Tell us about your new best friend.
Yeah, Mitch was editing it Sunday night while I was losing a bunch of money on the Suns.
I know. I felt bad. Like, no, seriously. Like, Ari's tweeting about the Suns, like down 7 or whatever it was. I'm editing. I'm like, I need him to answer this question, but I know he's probably not going to see my message because he's pissed about his bet. So it's a delicate balance. So
I was crying in the shower.
Grace and Manny, thanks for not being degenerate gamblers. So it helps
this is bad for Ari's brand.
Yes.
Like losing bets and falling in love with 3-stars. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, we don't even know you anymore.
Oh, I am like right now, and we'll get back on topic, but I think I am 2 for my last 18 bets. Like I am in the coldest streak I've ever been on in my entire. I cannot win.
Okay,
anyway.
so if you're a D1 head coach, offensive coordinator, and you could take Hoss Haney or any other player in the last 20 years of college football, who would it be?
Okay. Let's just bump the brakes. Okay. But no, but he's not going to be a 3-star in a few months. So like that's the caveat. It's like, Ari fell in love with a 3-star. It's like I didn't just fall in love with some like loser. That's not. He's going to rise up the rankings. Like he was supposed to go to Clemson this past weekend, and he didn't go to Clemson, so he could go to the Elite 11 because he's already locked in with TCU because of his family history and bond and location. Like if he would have gone to Clemson and gotten an offer, Grace, you know what would have happened. Like everybody would have taken a second look at him. He would have gotten more offers, and people would have viewed him differently. So my whole thing, and if you haven't read the story, I encourage you to go do it. But we're watching this kid throw, right? And there are a lot of players that are there that are ranked way higher than him. And when he comes out there, he's like letting it fly. He's letting it. He's gripping and ripping. Okay. Then everybody's seeing the ball, pierce through the air or whatever. And I was standing next to a recruiting analyst from another publication who was there. And he goes, man, if that kid was 2 inches taller, he would be a 5-star prospect. And I was like, like I did the Ari, And I started like thinking about it in my head, like stewing over that comment a little bit. And then I asked him, I said, why isn't he a high 4 or 5 now, just based on his 2 inches of height? And he goes, well, what we do at our publication, and what every recruiting analyst does, I think, is that they rank these players based on draftability or where they think that they would be selected in the NFL draft 4 years down the line. And then he said, go look up how many quarterbacks under 6 foot have been drafted in the last 3 years. And I did that. Big stats guy now. Big research guy. So I looked it up, and since the beginning of the 2019 draft, 43 quarterbacks have been selected. And I don't know if you guys read the story yet. If you haven't, would you like to offer a guess of how many of those 43 were under 6 feet?
1.
Just 1. Kyler Murray. And that'll clearly be 2. When Bryce Young gets picked number 1 overall next Thursday. And if it doesn't, then they're going to take my house away. But it got me thinking, though, that there's this disconnect. And you guys tell me if you think this is smart or if I'm just being an idiot. But all these...
Look at Mitch's pause. He's like, idiot.
But all these these fans who read recruiting rankings and listen to our show are college football fans. Doesn't mean they don't like the NFL too, but they are listening to our show because they're interested in college football. So if you're ranking players based off of where you think they're going to go to the NFL draft, that's not necessarily servicing the school that gets that kid in terms of insight. So, yes, Haas Haney, who lives in Alito, Texas, a defending state champion who runs a what was it? It's like sub 11 second
something good
meter dash. Like
my frame of reference
was it 10-6 or something like that?
It's 10-6. He's faster than running backs, and has a rocket arm. Yeah, he's probably not going to be a first round pick. He might not even get drafted because he's not tall enough. But that doesn't mean that TCU didn't just get a stud that's going to throw for 5,000 yards, or 4,000 yards a year and 1,000 yards rushing and break every record and be a Heisman finalist. So, like, the fact that he's rated in the 700s right now is a complete misrating, and that's going to be corrected. It already started. I think On3's already changed it after that performance on Sunday. But even if he's never a 5-star, because he's not going to be because of his height, that doesn't mean that TCU didn't get a 5-star talent or a player that could perform like a 5-star at the college level. And, if you read my headline, the headline was TCU got a 5-star splash out of a 3-star prospect or something. Like, me, like I am. If you're a 3-star, like, don't even look at me. I'm not going to act like, but like, it takes a lot for me to write a story like that with that type of headline. And like, he performed well enough for me to do that. And it also kind of revealed to me that there is some flaws in the recruiting rankings.
Well, Grace, what did your story about Wake Forest quarterback and Dave Clawson? I'll let you talk about. Well, what don't they care about as much as other features?
Height. That's why as soon as you said that, I was like, I wonder, A, if Wake was ever in on him, or B, if he ever had any interest in them, because that is their entire blueprint, is go getting shorter guys and winning with them and proving people wrong.
How tall is Sam Hartman? Is he shorter?
Yeah, he's like, I think he was
6 maybe.
6 feet, maybe.
He's definitely not. I've seen him. He's definitely not like one of those.
Mitch Griffiths is 5'11", I think.
Yeah, their quarterback this year.
He's 6'1". Okay, so even that, but that's still a pretty good size.
But they're, like Grace just said, their projected starter, their definite starter, Mitch Griffiths is 5'11". So
5'11".
And the thing about 5'11", and I'm 5'11", it's like you're not a short human if you're 5'11". Like, you're an average sized male at that height. It's just not conducive to the NFL. But you know what TCU doesn't care about? The NFL. They just want to get stud to play really good football for them for 3 or 4 years, and they found that. And this, I'm happier here, Grace, because I wanted to bend your ear on this one. But you know how Clemson always goes one at a time?
Mm-hmm.
At quarterback position?
Yeah.
They might have lost him because of that.
I was going to ask you about that.
If they would have sped it up, and like, you know what, Air, you're our guy, but as long as we have to wait for you, we're gonna look around.
Or they could have offered him and said, "We're offering you.
Get on
we want you to
campus
come to town."
3 weeks ago, and not waited for Aaron Nolan. He might have been Clemson's commitment.
Do you think he would have? Okay, I have 2 questions for you, actually, Ari. Do you think A, he had interest, and B, did he say anything about like, yes, I'm aware that I was their 5th choice?
He was interested in Clemson, interested enough to think about going out there, but the thing that is interesting about his whole scenario is that he has a very deep family connection to TCU.
Yeah.
So like both of his parents were athletes there, played football there, started businesses as a result of their connections to TCU, and like lived 15 minutes away from campus. So like, I don't know that Clemson would have ever gotten him, even if they got him on campus. But also too, if you are a quarterback and you go to Clemson and look around, when you look at all the other offers he has, it's different there.
Yeah.
Like that's the same thing that happens with every other 3-star prospect that gets a taste of that level. So I think that based on the timing of it and what happened with Aaron Nolan, and I'm not saying that Clemson did anything wrong, but I do think that there are potential backfires, for doing it that way. It's worked for them for 5, 6, 7, 10 years now, right? So I'm not criticizing it, but sometimes I wonder on a case-to-case basis, if you peel back the curtain a little bit, timing does matter in this scenario,
Sure. Yeah.
I think that's a good point. I want to transition to Miami Hurricanes. Now, Manny, this program's recruiting class was ranked number 7 nationally last year. Obviously, there's a long history of 3 stars panning out and doing very well. We wrote a lot about them in our 3-star youth story that published yesterday. I think it's interesting that Miami's, I get the 3-star quarterback was Judd Anderson. They like his measurables and all that. It just seems a little strange to me that they're on this run of like 4 straight 3 stars at this time of year when they've got open spots that can keep evaluating kids. And a lot of these kids, quite frankly, probably they could get these same kids in December. Like if the lineman went from New Jersey, let's say commits to Rutgers, but Miami re-enters the picture in December. So you wrote in there, is it time to panic, Miami fans? Clearly it's not time to panic, but don't you find it a little interesting that Mario's on this kind of 3-star run at this time of year?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at the big picture, right, is Mario the kind of guy who enjoys taking 3 stars? No, I think he cares a whole lot about star rankings and having a recruiting class rank in the top 10. It's what he's known for. He was the national recruiter of the year at Alabama. He did a tremendous job at Oregon recruiting. But I think in this case, especially coming off a 5-7 season for Miami, they're really not in it with a lot of the 5-star guys who were making decisions early, right? The 5 and 4 stars. I think outside of Aaron Nolan, really, I mean, the kids that they're in on that are, top 100 players and blue chippers are all guys who are going to make decisions over the summer. And when you look at the calendar last year, Miami signed 16 blue chip recruits. Only 2 of them were committed before the end of June. And that was, 2 local Miami guys, Bobby and Robbie Washington. So, I mean, I think part of this is the calendar, Mitch, and last year they took 8 3-star guys or lower as part of their recruiting class, and I think Mario's letting a lot of his new assistants just kind of pick the guys that they like. And I pointed this out to you in a separate conversation, but right now, if you look at the 247 Sports composite, there's only 1,244 players ranked in the composite. And you go back to 2 previous years, it's 2,200 and 2,300 players ranked. And so, yes, guys are unranked right now and becoming 3 stars that are part of this class, but they're guys that could very well climb to be 4 stars,
sure,
by the end of the year. And so I think Mario, again, he's giving his assistant coaches the benefit of the doubt with some of these players. I know, Dylan Day from Louisiana is a kid that was unranked 3 days ago before he committed to Miami, but he's up to like 560 something. I think I saw his ranking. I don't know if they've adjusted it again, but he's obviously a talent. LSU's interested in him. It's just about jumping on guys early. So I think it's easy to kind of pick on Miami and say, look at Florida and Florida State. They're doing so much better. They're ranked in the top 10. I just think Mario's letting his guys pick a couple 3 stars that they really like and get them early before maybe they jump on board. And I will say every 3-star that they've taken had other Power 5 offers. They're not like,
it'll be interesting to look back at this group from this stretch and see where they're ranked and how they do. All right.
What do you think the reason for that is, though? Like that they're not in on guys that are committing early? Is it because it's a new staff and they just got there too late? No. Even then they've been here for a year, but what's the problem?
I just think Florida and Florida State have targeted, when you compare them to their rivals, I think those programs were focused in on guys that were going to make earlier decisions. Like Miami's in on a bunch of 4 and 5-star defensive linemen. Those are the guys that they're really after. Mario, last year was offensive line for Mario when he first got there. I think this year it's defensive line, and they've hosted a bunch of top 100 defensive linemen throughout the spring, but those guys aren't making decisions until, summertime or even the fall carrying into the season. So I think it's just a matter of timing with a lot of this stuff, Ari. I think in some ways, yes, there's probably a little bit of pressure because Mario does pay attention to what the rivals are doing. And I mean, think about it. Miami's only commitment for a long time was a kicker until they picked up, Judd Anderson a couple weeks ago. So they've kind of gone on this little mini run. But I also think it's just them trying to lock in a few kids that they look at as depth pieces that can be, part of this class and help them going forward.
Ari, you want to talk about what's more embarrassing? Mario Cristobal's
the
run
idea,
of 3 stars, or your friend in the 5th grade?
Did Miami set this up so that they committed every day to try to get headlines back?
Yeah, I think so. I think Mario, if you look at last year, Mario did the same thing. I mean, like from June 28th to July 4th, he had 5 kids commit.
Staying in the news cycle.
Well, actually, this is the second time Mitch, that you and I have been a part of a conversation where a coach is worried about public perception based on what's happening in recruiting. And I find that to be interesting because, like, it does not matter at all, especially because one of the coaches has a really good team.
It's such the long run. I mean, signing day, like,
no one cares. No one remembers where you were
about
in February.
3 days in April based on what's going to happen in December.
I'd say this. I think Mario cares about momentum and he cares about the image in terms of the elite guys that he's after. And so if you have nobody committed and you've got all these 4 and 5 stars coming to your spring game and they're like, yeah, you've got a kicker and some low 3-star quarterback committed, like they're like, okay, what are you really doing here? But if you have a couple of other kids that sort of commit while all this is going on, then in his mind, I think you're building a little bit of momentum.
Yeah, I don't know if I would use the 3 stars as okay. One time when I was like 10 or 11 years old, remember back in the day?
Okay, good. Because I teased this story in.
Do you remember back in the day? Like, I think Grace is too young. How old are you, Grace?
29.
Yeah, you might be a little.
Grace, you've been 29 for the last 2 years, right?
I know, right?
Like 29.
Wait, are you about to say I'm too young for roller rinks? I had my like 9th birthday party there.
Okay, so like, are roller rinks still a thing with kids? Like to this day?
So.
I took my girls to roller rink a couple years ago.
Okay.
My kids had parties.
Like I remember, like when I was right when Men in Black came out. Remember that?
Yeah.
Here comes the Men in Black. You know the songs, the Savage Garden, like back.
We said
yes.
yes.
I don't know how. Savage Garden. Want to hear the other one? Ooh, I want you. I don't know if I need you, but ooh, I'm dying to find out.
2-star performance right there.
Now picture me as an 11-year-old, like a small Peter Griffin, flying around a roller rink. And one of my buddies, I was there with a bunch of friends because that was like the thing to do when I was in 4th or 5th grade. It was even maybe younger. And like the guy was like feeling, here comes the Man in Black. And somebody comes behind him and de-pants him on the rink, which is unbelievable that he didn't fall when you consider like, because I think he like
that's
had
a
both of his
5-star
feet.
move right there.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Agility.
Neither one of them fell? The de-pantser or the
No. When we were like rollerblades. This is like back when Brink came out. Like I'm talking like Team X Blade stuff. And
there's a point to the story, but everyone.
I'm 35 years old and I'll never forget it. That kid just like was so bloodshot red in the face because he was like wearing tighty whities. Like it was like quintessential like Little Giants type scene like embarrassment. And I think using 5 stars or 3 stars to up your public persona is maybe as embarrassing as that.
Wow.
Maybe.
It's a strong take.
Dude, you're Miami. This is
you write a column on that.
Dude, I don't know.
Ari, they were 5-7 last year, man.
I don't give a shit if they were 5-7 last year. Have you watched the 30 for 30s? The Miami used to be the most badass place. Like if I were Mario, and I don't know, like everybody always talks about like this, and I don't even know, man, you tell me if it's even possible. I would make Miami the most badass place. Like I would make everybody hate me. I'd make people think that we were cheating. I'd want to be like the dirty program. And I don't know if I'd actually want my players to be dirty, but I'd want to like bring back that persona of like, oh my God, like you're intimidated or imposed by Miami's presence. Like
Manny Diaz tried that with the turnover chain. It didn't work out for him.
That? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe is it just like too late to capture that?
To capture
like,
that
it's all fake
badassery
until they start winning.
Yeah,
that badassery.
Yeah.
You can't do that when you're not winning and no one's at the games. Like if they can recreate that environment.
Did people go to the games in the early 2000s?
When they were big games. I mean, that Miami's an event town, man. Like if Florida State's here or some nationally ranked team is here, they'll show up. But the reality is,
like when Ken Dorsey was the quarterback and Kellen, I'm a soldier, Wilson was there. Their stadium was half empty.
There were games against pre-Big Ten Rutgers that had 30,000. You know, I remember Temple 25,000. 20,000 people at the Orange
When they were
Bowl.
number 1.
When they were number 1, yes, they were. The old Big East days were pretty awful.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes me sad because I remember like when Miami played football when I was 15, 16 years old. That was it. That was like I had all my friends from middle school were Miami fans. Like that was like the place. And it really breaks my heart that it's kind of gone. It's like now we're like propping up a 3-star offensive lineman from Timbuktu so that we don't lose whatever. I don't know where he's from. It doesn't matter where he's from.
New Jersey, yeah.
Yeah. It's not Miami. It's not Dade.
It's not the 305, baby.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know. Just bring it back. Manny, just
easier said
do it.
Easier said than done. All right, so Grace wrote about Josiah Thompson, South Carolina, in-state kid from South Carolina who committed. By the way, it's from Dillon High School, which is just great. Coach Taylor, brought back some great memories from Friday Night Lights. So South Carolina has 3 of the top 4 players in the state. Their average player rating right now is 93.18, which is very, very good. But one thing about this story stood out, and if you guys read it, the high school coach was talking about like how under Shane Beamer, everyone was so nice at South Carolina for their visits. Now, maybe he'd been on some bad days before, but like he said, Clemson, everyone's nice. Like, why weren't they nice under Will Muschamp? Like, I find like, why was that special that like on recruiting visits, people at the University of South Carolina were nice to host? So again, it could have been just this one guy's perspective, had a bad visit there, but he's an in-state coach, Grace, right? Who'd been there for been coaching the state for like 30 years. That just stuck out to me. And good on Shane Beamer, but bad on previous staffs. You gotta make everyone feel, whether it's a high school coach, an uncle, everyone needs to feel welcome on your campus.
Yeah, I thought that was stunning. And he, like you said, Mitch, it wasn't just one previous staff. He's been a coach in our state since the 90s. But to me, I would think that with the chaos of an official visit and like all the stress that goes into planning it and all of this, the hecticness, the absolute easiest part would be telling the person who opens the door to be polite, like smile and say hello. Like that just seems like the literal bare minimum. And I thought it was interesting that he said it had always been that way at Clemson, not even just under Dabo, like at Clemson. And for whatever reason,
can't we just be nice?
Yeah. And he said
maybe that's a problem at Miami, Manny. Maybe everyone's just really mean.
Mario opens the door for everybody down there. He's begging for help.
Yeah, he opens the door even wider for 3 stars. Yeah, he loves the 3 stars. So yeah, I found that interesting. In South Carolina got 2 more commitments this week. I believe one in-state kid and another one from not DC, but somewhere, maybe not Delaware, but somewhere in that.
They got a Maryland kid.
Maryland from the and that's, we've talked about that before. That's a focal point geographically. They've had some assistants that then have been up there. So Penn State lands Donovan Harbor, offensive lineman, on Tuesday, the #1 recruit in Wisconsin, from Catholic Memorial High School in Waukesha, about an hour away. And Corey Smith, his teammate, there's a #3 player in the state, likely headed to Penn State. I don't know if you guys read Jesse Temple's mailbag today, or it was out yesterday in the Athletic. And Jesse's written a lot about recruiting under Luke Fickell and how well they're doing. And Jesse's pretty well connected, the staff. Basically, the point was that the new staff did not offer these kids. The #1 is top 200 player nationally, the #1 kid in the state, #3 kid in the state from a high school that produces a lot of talent, and they're going to Penn State. Ari, are you calling bullshit?
It reminded me, it's like, is that payback for Nolan Rucci?
Yeah, it's a good trade there. But I just find it hard to, I mean, I know these staffs need to evaluate. I'm not saying that, and who knows how these kids pan out. I just find it very strange that 4-star kids in state weren't offered by the new staff. But again, I'm not saying they're lying. I just found that very strange.
Yeah, that's the biggest struggle in our jobs, right? Like, you talk to people affiliated with the team that came up short, and you always get their version of it, And it's like, did they actually not offer, or were they still evaluating and wanted them to come to camp? Like, all those things are always on the table. Like at the end of the cycle in December, will that kid be a person that Wisconsin wouldn't take if he wanted to go there? I think that is different than whether or not he has an offer or was offered now, or had a committable, whatever, however you want to phrase it. So, I mean, I guess I could buy it. I don't know. Like, Luke Fickell's whole thing is, raise the standard. But when you have that type of player in your state, you would expect like that would be the #1 thing you would do when you get to school. So, all you can do is, talk to the kid and talk to the staff and, get what you can get. But, it wouldn't be the most unbelievable thing I've ever heard, but I find it surprising like you do.
Right, and I think it's interesting, Manny, too, because the relationships are so important. I mean, you see it in South Florida with the Miami coaches. There's so
Yeah.
many good high schools there. Like, what responsibility is not the right word, but you're the new coach in the state, and it's a high school that produces a lot of talent, and you can't just take kids because you want, because the high school coach wants you to. But it's
Right.
that balance there of not pissing off the high school coach, not pissing off the high school, the other kids. And so I always find that a very delicate balance, and it probably happens a lot in Miami because those Miami high schools want to send their kids, especially back in the heyday, they want to send their kids to Miami, and some of the coaches probably get pissed off and they don't get offers.
Yeah, I mean, as long as I've been covering the team down here and just been around different coaching staffs, I mean, you talk to the high school coaches and they have the guys that they like, the ones that they feel like they have a good relationship with, that they trust, and then they have the coaches that they feel like just totally ignore them and don't give them enough attention. It's just kind of a cyclical thing. But, I'll give you an example with Miami, that's kind of an interesting situation. Hollywood Chaminade's one of the best high school programs in the country. They've got all these blue chip guys that Miami's interested in. Well, Miami had some former Chaminade guys on the team transfer out within the last year. And when I went to the high school and talked to the coaches down there, they were pissed because they weren't playing their guys. Well, guess what? Jeremiah Smith's committed to Ohio State now, and they're trying to get JoJo Trader, and they're trying to get Zaquan Patterson, who's the top 100 safety. So, like, those relationships and the way that you sort of just nurture it year to year to year is so vital. And as good a recruiter as Mario Cristobal is, if the previous staffs or other guys before you have sort of screwed that relationship up, or maybe you didn't play the guys that you didn't recruit, like, that can affect you with guys that you want to recruit. And it's just that whole interesting dynamic, right?
Yeah.
How do you get mad because your guys aren't playing?
Well, you get
People
upset.
aren't rational.
Right. Some coaches get upset that you make empty promises to our players, right? Like, and I think the thing
that's
is
different if they say you're going to start from day one. But what if they just stink?
right. Well, I think, but you're talking about high school coaches whose
Right.
interest is in their players, right, and in their guys, and
They hear what they want to hear.
Right, exactly, and that's the tough part for the college coach. Even, like, again, Mario didn't recruit any of those guys that transferred out. He inherited them, didn't play them, but the relationship is a little damaged with Chaminade because of what happened and the way it played out last year. So it's just, that's just one example.
You know what I would do if I were the head coach? I'd be like, hey, listen, whether we win or lose is my job. And you don't think I want to win more than you do? Like, I would be like, I will play the best player that I can at every position because I don't want to get fired.
Right.
But yeah, it's
as an aside
to
that, when, like, I every year at Athlon, I used to write the Vanderbilt preview because I was local, whatever. And I remember talking to Bobby Johnson once. There was a year where, like, I don't know, there's a quarterback and some fans wanted someone else to play, and I just interviewed him. I asked him about the quarterback, and then I shut it off, and he just looked at me like he wasn't mad at me. But he goes, "Do people really think we're not going to play the guy that we think is the best? Like, what is wrong with people?" Like, and so it's kind of what you just said, that Ari. It's like these coach. I mean, sure, there are times, Manny, maybe in this case, that they're playing some of the guys they recruited because they're their guys and stuff. But coaches want to win, and they're going to do whatever they can to win. But that you guys talk to more 7-on-7 coaches, high school coaches than I do. But what I've heard talking to some of our writers at The Athletic who deal with these coaches is some phenomenon like that, like a local 7-on-7 coach. They will have their elite players, and these coaches love sending their kids to Alabama, Ohio State, whatever. And then the 3 stars that they think are undervalued, they'll tell the local school. And then they get pissed when the local school doesn't take these guys. And the local school's like, what the hell? You tell all the top 100 guys to go to these elite programs, and then you get mad at me if I don't take the guys that we don't think are good enough. And I'm sure that happens all over the place.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's so many examples here in South Florida that I've come across, like I said, over the years where, Miami coaches are sort of angry, like, hey, this coach is steering kids to Ohio State. Ohio State's pulled a lot of kids from South Florida Express 7-on-7 the last few years. And those accusations are always flying. You guys are directing kids to Ohio State that are Miami area kids. Why are you doing that? So, yeah, I mean, it's just a part of college football. It's the way it is.
Yep. I saw someone tweet this on another note. It's supposed to be, Colorado spring game is this week, and it's sold out. Everyone's like, there's like 1,500 people there last year. It's sold out this year, and so it's supposed to be cold in Boulder. And someone's like, that's the first thing that hasn't gone well for Dion. So it'd be interesting if he has a bunch of kids from like the Southeast or Miami or whatever, and it's 40 degrees in the spring or 45 degrees in Boulder.
I think Caleb Odom's going out there, the top 100 tight end. I talked to him for a little bit at the OT7, and Yeah, he's excited about it. I don't think they care. I mean, they'll care about the cold when they're actually having to live there, but a visit, they could care less, man.
Yeah, Ari
I prefer the cold. I don't know. Like, I'd much
says the
rather
guy who grew up in
play-
Arizona and lives in Dallas, right?
Yeah. it
Did
sucks.
Ohio State do anything, Ari, in recruiting to hide the cold? And I don't know how to phrase it, like not trying to have kids come in the summer. And so, I mean, but back then official visits were all in December and January.
Well, they
so
always their big recruiting visit was always the Michigan game, which is the last game of the year.
So I guess
The one thing I'll say about Columbus is that it gets cold, but it's not like snowy. Like, if you go up to Cleveland, like it gets like abrasively Lake Erie snow. And for me, it's like they have an indoor practice facility. So, I just like sometimes will stand out at the camps, and you guys have too, and it's like 106 degrees outside. And I'm like standing on the sideline. I'm like, I would kill for it to be cold right now.
Oh yeah.
Like I would much
you
rather
can dress up
too
for the
cold.
cold. Yeah.
Yeah,
Or as much as you like
rather-
to walk around your house with your shirt off, that probably would not be a good look at a camp.
I set my our air conditioning bill was a lot of money this past. My favorite state, and I did this in Austin this past weekend, especially when my wife's not with me, is to make the room as cold as humanly possible, and then bundle up under the covers. Like that's my ultimate comfort.
You did this in Phoenix last year because you came to our summit and you were like, "It's 55 degrees in my room right now."
I do it every. I Googled. I know how to break. You know how sometimes when you go to a hotel, and it won't let you put the air conditioning down lower than a certain point, it stops.
You break them everywhere you go?
I just YouTube how to like break the interface so I can make it go lower.
Wow.
Yeah, like you could hang meat in my hotel room. If I'm not shivering, then someone's not working hard enough.
Alrighty then. So I went to look at the class rankings because Landon Thomas, the 5-star tight end, flipped from Georgia to Florida State, had been a Florida State commit, and that vaulted Ari Wasserman's beloved Ohio State Buckeyes to the #1 spot in the 24 rankings. But what I wanted to do is average player rating, because I mentioned South Carolina before. South Carolina is actually 5th in average player rating at 93.18, which to me is great for the Gamecocks, because we've seen programs like South Carolina. South Carolina is a better recruiting program historically than Texas Tech, Ari, but like, what was it this time last year? Texas Tech was like #1 in the recruiting rankings because they had like 22 commitments and everyone else had like 10. So South Carolina's appearance as a top, they're #11 right now, is not just because of the number of commitments, it's because of the quality. So Alabama is 18th overall, but #1, shockingly, with an average player rating of 95.85. #2 is Florida, 94.60. #3 is Georgia, 94.22. And Ohio State is #4. And then South Carolina is #5. So that's the number we always look at there. And then Michigan's the top 3 class, LSU 4, Florida State 5. So just some early numbers.
I can't believe we're talking about Florida State when Miami did a big misdirection this week with all those commitments.
Yeah, I know. Well, you know what? We spent 30 seconds on Florida State.
I legitimately forgot that Florida State had a 5-star flip from Georgia.
Well, you know what? Mario's playing checkers. Or chess. We're playing checkers.
He's playing checkers, all right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
So I mentioned Washington earlier. This one caught my eye. Savell Smalls, 5-star linebacker from Washington or from in-state, is transferring. And I believe he was the guy that is the reason that Dan Mullen, that Florida got put on a little probation. Man, does that sound familiar? That I think Dan Mullen was up in Seattle and there was an illegal contact.
Yeah, I think that was the scenario.
I think
that's
Notre Dame too.
That's why his name rang a bell when I saw the tweet.
Yeah.
Today.
So, and we've talked before this became a 4-person pod, back in the me and Ari days. We'd talk a lot about Washington. I would talk about Washington. Ari would get pissed because they don't recruit well, and I just think it's a program that should be better. So,
you think it should be like a national championship contender?
I think they should win it every year.
1974.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's beautiful up there, and they did win a national title. So
what year was that?
91. You've been talking about Miami, how great Miami used to be, right?
That was in my lifetime.
Well, that was in my lifetime. We all have different lifetimes.
Lifetime. Yeah, it was 2 years before the Waco incident. It was.
Ari drove by.
I went to Mount Carmel on the way back from Austin.
Yeah. So
before in the pre-Mitch or the pre-4-person podcast, Mitch and I talked a lot about polygamy and cults. So if you guys want to talk about this, I went to the cult site.
Yeah, we need to get Grace and Manny's thoughts on Colorado City, Arizona, and polygamy, and we'll have to maybe a special separate pod.
That's a separate pod for that one.
I want to go to a school that has an entire football team made up of siblings.
Yeah.
There's got to be a recruitable athlete.
Talk about have good chemistry on that team. They can break any practice rules. So, okay, back to Washington. So they've had 2 local 5-star signees in the past 4 cycles, and neither have panned out. Sam Heward transferred to Cal Poly, and Savell Smalls transferred is in the portal now. There were no 5-stars in the 24 cycle. There were none in 23. In 22 is Josh Conerly, who went to Oregon. 21 is JT Tuimoloau. Is that correct, Ari? Tuimoloau. Ohio State. Emeka Egbuka, Ohio State. So the point being, they're not going to return to this glory that I want them to return to unless they can.
But both of whom are going to probably be drafted in the first or second round too.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know. Conerly, did he play much? I don't know. He was a freshman last year.
He was a freshman.
So, it's just, I don't know if it's bad luck or whatever, but the 2 of the 5-stars in the past 7 years they got both transferred and did not make an impact there. So it's like when you're a school like Washington in a big city that does produce some talent, you got to keep the talent there, and the ones you get, they got to pan out. So, Ari, would you like to comment on my beloved Huskies?
We got to go look at the total data from the story that we did that ran on Wednesday, the 3-star U story about like how Washington's done as a whole. I don't have it in front of me right now, but yeah, if you're going to get smoked in your own city for 5-star prospects and then lose them and then stink at developing the ones that you get,
not a formula for success.
It's a nice formula for sucking ass. So I don't know.
Well,
but
Mitch,
they're pretty good. They're supposed to win the Pac or be a Pac-12 contender this year. So
I mean, their state is California. That's where they get the majority of their studs. But like, if you were to rank just Washington as a state, we go back to my story from a couple months ago. 23rd overall in terms of Power 5 signees since 2018. So I mean, that's
higher than I would have thought it would.
But they've had a good run of 5-stars. They had a 2 or 3 year period where they had like 6 5-stars. That's why But
and they're all at Ohio State now.
Yeah, but yeah, you're right, Manny. No doubt they live. Their success is going to be based on how well they do in California, and they're doing well.
And doesn't Oregon, like now that you have your spreadsheet open, you can do a control F for me, Manny?
Yeah.
How many of the 5-star prospects or the top 100 players in Seattle went to Oregon? Like
I don't know.
Rival?
I got to look that up, but I'm sure probably a good amount.
Yeah, like Oregon swooping in and getting Conerly. Yeah. So, but like also too, it's like the thing with California is that the entire conference is recruiting California.
Right. And Ohio State and Alabama.
And Georgia and Clemson with a P.
Yes. Like I mentioned earlier, there's a big run on commitments this week, mostly coming off of spring games. I'm going to run through them real quick, and feel free to interject if there's anything interesting here. I'm not going to mention them all, but Michigan continues to put together a really good offensive line class. 4-star offensive tackle Blake Frazier from Austin, Texas. Ari, did you visit him while you were down there?
No. Okay. I visited
David Koresh.
Yeah, David Koresh. His gravesite. Yeah.
Alabama went to Pennsylvania, got Rico Scott, 4-star wide receiver from Harrisburg. Florida State, we mentioned Landon Thomas. They also got 4-star athlete Loane McCoy from Miami Central.
I spoke to him.
I assume that was the guy Miami wanted.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about Loane is that when he made that commitment, I don't think he was with his parents on that trip, and so it's kind of one of those monitor here for a flip, so to speak, with Miami. His former coach is on staff at Miami. Roland Smith is one of the high-paid analysts there at Miami, so I would think that I wouldn't rule out the Hurricanes in this.
You hear that, Ari? Miami might get a 4-star.
Coming back.
Well, they better come up with a sweet plan on when they allow him to commit when he does. Florida
State also.
I think. Hey, you know what's be a good story?
What?
And I don't know if this is possible. Like, what program has been involved in the most flips for and against? Like, I don't know if you could even look that up. But
like, how many
I feel like Miami,
right?
Flipmas is like located in Dade County, right?
Oh yeah,
like,
yeah.
Is Miami more?
You could look up decommitments. That's the easiest way to do it, right?
Yeah,
But yes, if you look back, I looked this up while I was covering Miami pretty intensely for The Athletic the first few years. I think they were number one in the country in decommitments during the Manny Diaz era, pretty much. I mean, they averaged like 18 to 20 decommitments a year.
I don't
And
like
a
to
lot of them were
gamble.
South Florida guys just flipping.
I don't like to gamble very often, but if I were to gamble on this,
You love to gamble all
there's
the time.
no question in my mind that there is more decommitments and flips and just general grabassery in the state of Florida than any other state in America.
I agree 100%, Ari. There's a
Yeah.
whole lot of
That's
that.
an official stat, grabassery, by the way.
Grabassery, yes.
Yeah, there's a lot. That's a Florida
Well,
man exists in the recruiting down there. I'll
Yeah.
tell you. Yeah.
Florida State also gets 4-star athlete BJ Gibson from Rochelle, Georgia. South Carolina, we mentioned Josiah Thompson. Have to say Miami got 4-star wide receiver Chance Robinson from Fort Lauderdale, number 144, in addition to their run of 3 stars. Florida goes into Texas and gets 4-star safety Xavier Filsame from McKinney, Texas, number 36 overall, which is basically right on the cusp of 5-star status. Oregon goes into Missouri, a little random there, to get 4-star defensive lineman Tion Gray. Texas Tech 4-star edge Cheetah Ophel from Satch, Texas. You know where that is? S-A.
I think that
I know there's a million. Satch,
and I think that's his name's Cheetah. That's Tyreek Hill's nephew.
Oh, is it really? Okay.
No, it's just
Oh,
people call Tyreek Hill Cheetah.
okay, gotcha. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Here's an interesting one. Cincinnati 4-star linebacker Quay Birdsong from LaGrange, Georgia, 172. For all the talk about how well Luke Fickell and staff recruited, which they did for a G5 program, he would be the highest rated signee in program history, the modern recruiting history. So that's a big one. And we mentioned Penn State with Donovan Harbor. So, all right, we got one mailbag question from last week, which this isn't really about recruiting, but it's a fun question, especially for you guys. You've all covered a lot of football over the years, and we've talked about stuff like this in the past. But rank your 5 favorite stadiums to attend a game as a media member.
Oh,
so that's as a media member. So maybe not like just the fun, because you could really.
We're just ranking stadiums based on like atmosphere, press box
like not
comfortability,
necessarily
access.
Well, I mean, you can throw in like some stadiums have great press boxes, so you love the meal there.
That's what I'm saying, like Stanford, for instance, has granite countertops and wheelchairs, like the chairs, the office chairs with the wheels.
You've been to Stanford?
Like, yeah, I went to Arizona.
Okay, so when you're in
I've
school.
been to all the Pac-12 schools except Washington State and Oregon State.
Oh,
I've been to
jealous.
I've been to every SEC school. Washington, Michigan as a fan, but I haven't been to many as a media member other than SEC.
But are we ranking it based on like experience as a media member or what stadiums are the coolest?
It says to attend the game as a media member, but I would just let's go as the coolest. No, let's just go as the coolest stadium.
I thought Kyle Field was pretty cool when I went there with Miami last year. Just the whole swing of the press box. Yeah. That's a little terrifying, but if you're into thrills, it's pretty cool.
George is my favorite.
Are we doing just our favorite?
Well, we can just spitball here. I like George. George is my favorite as far as beautiful stadium, cool town, everything about it. Alabama's great too. Tennessee.
This is the hardest one because Penn State has the worst reporter experience.
Right.
Because their press box was built pre the Great Depression, I think. Like it was like in that era, like between 1910 and 1915. No, it was 1912 was the Great Depression, right? So pre Great Depression. But it is the coolest stadium.
The Depression was in the 20s.
I thought it was like 30s.
Yeah, late 20s, early 30s.
Was that during your lifetime, Mitch?
No, but I'm not an idiot. I know American history.
All right, let's see. 1929 to 1939.
Yeah, 1929.
What did you say? 1912?
So it was built roughly in the midst of the Great Depression. And they have a one-person bathroom, which is hilarious to me because there's 150 people up there. But Penn State,
that not ideal.
Everybody always says, and I've never been to Death Valley, and I've never been to the Swamp, and I've actually never been to Kyle Field either. But everybody always says that the SEC stadiums just get so much louder than other conferences. And I went to Alabama last year with Andy during my SEC foray, and they were playing A&M, and the game came down to the last play of the game, and it was not louder than Penn State. Now, granted, whenever I went to every Big Ten stadium I went to, I was there covering Ohio State, so I got the best home crowd that place had to offer. But Penn State is insanely cool. Like it is like the whiteout, because I always covered it during the whiteout. So I don't know what it's like at a noon game against Toledo, but against Ohio State with their whiteout, you got the laptop shaking, you got everybody wearing white, they're jumping up and down. It's a madhouse in there. I always thought that was cool. Autzen Stadium is also really awesome. Stanford had the best in press box comfort. Michigan has great food.
I was going to interrupt you for a second and just say I thought, when I went to the Coliseum last year with the South Florida Express on that little trip out west where we hit UCLA and USC, I mean, it wasn't a game day, but just the view of downtown LA and the mountains was pretty, I don't know, pretty awesome.
Man, so did you say the Rose Bowl? I mean, like the Rose Bowl is the best game day experience, because if you cover the actual Rose Bowl game, like I was flying in from the middle of the winter and you land and it's 72 degrees outside and the mountains turn purple. Like that's probably the best game day setting. But we're talking about press box, right?
Yeah. Well, just whatever. The whole experience. Manny, what do you think of the Swamp?
Cool place. I mean, it's a great atmosphere. I was there when Tim Tebow kicked Randy Shannon and Miami's ass 26-3 on their way to the national championship. That's the last time I was there for a game. And great atmosphere. I mean, what I like about it is just the campus feel. I mean, I cover Miami, who doesn't have an on-campus stadium, so to see the students sort of just enjoy that whole
and they're
moment.
so close to the field,
right?
I can grade stadiums based on like how much room there is for the sideline reporter to maneuver. And Florida is one of the worst because it's so the stands are so close to the actual benches.
So does Miami not get like campus hype on game days? Like, is it just like they don't have, because that's like such a shame.
They did when they played Notre Dame, when they were off to that 10-0 start a few years ago. Again, it's an event town. When Miami's great and they're elite and they're playing good teams, I mean, being in that Orange Bowl when it's rocking for a huge game, when they used to play in the Orange Bowl, I mean, there was nothing like it for me. And I'd been to a lot of other places and seen a lot of other atmospheres, but they play it at a stadium that's 20 miles away from campus, and I think it's really hard to just transfer that over to a place that's so far removed from anything with the students. So,
but it's near the casino, isn't it?
It's near the dog track. It's near the dog track, not near the casino. No. But
it's just named after the casino,
right?
All right, Grace, give us a little ACC rundown.
I mean, Clemson's the best, I think, by far. Clemson's press box is open air, which I love. You're just right there with the fans. Their Wi-Fi is absolute ass, but the media experience is pretty sick otherwise, because you can hear everything. I think NC State is like sneaky good, and like those fans are just so loyal and so passionate, and their tailgating scene is just a giant field with Bojangles boxes everywhere. So that's always like one of my.
Ari's like, when's our trip to Raleigh?
Like, when are we going to NC State?
What did he say? Bojangles? Yeah.
Yeah. So those two are my favorite.
Hey Grace, I would say, what about the intro in Blacksburg? I mean, with Metallica.
Oh, I see. I only went during COVID, so I felt robbed there. But yes. I've heard that at its peak is.
Yeah, I've been to Virginia Tech. It was really cool.
I've been there when the stadium was empty. It looks cool.
That was the first game that Ohio State played after winning the national championship the following year when Braxton Miller did that spin move.
They lost, right? Mm-hmm. Oh no, they lost at home. Didn't they lose?
They lost at home the year they won the championship. The following year, they won by a lot. I think.
Was that the game? Was that the game? Was that the game Lee Corso's car got hit by a lightning? Was there lightning? Was there a storm that day?
I don't recall that, but maybe.
Okay, because his car got hit. His rental car got hit by lightning. So, all right. Anybody got anything else before we go a little trivia?
I have a story I have to finish today, so if you were on time, then maybe we'd be
Oh, as my grandmother used to say, Ari, oy vey. Oy vey.
Hey, my grandma said that too a lot.
I wonder why.
God.
Ari's like, wow, every woman in my life says that a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, I did this the other day, so I got to reread it to be sure. It's by the way, someone just in my DMs, Grace, one of our listeners just kind of ripped on you, by the way, Grace. Affectionately.
Nothing new.
Yeah.
What they say?
Tyler Cox said, "Hey, Mitch, just wanted to tell you and Ari a funny story. In my college football group text, all Baylor grads, one of my buddies shared the Baylor 38% of 4-stars got drafted stat, and I immediately thought to ask what his source was so I could in turn ask you if you could create a trivia question, ask for Ari. Lo and behold, it ended up being from y'all's article. Great work and great article. Love seeing how much better Baylor has been, blah, blah, blah." So I said, "Oh, that's funny. I could probably still ask Ari the question and he'd get it wrong." And then he said, "Yes, just like Grace the other week after reading Manny's SEC column."
Oh my God. That was a disaster.
I don't know the
Tyler's right.
percentages by heart. I
Yeah,
know who
I know.
won.
That's what I was joking. Yeah, there's a lot of numbers in there. So, okay. Thanks, Tyler Cox. Thanks for listening.
He's not wrong. You're right, Tyler.
Which programs had the most players drafted from 2012 through 22 who did not either play in a BCS national title game? I included that because 2012 and 13, or 2012, or play in the college football playoff. So basically, which programs that have not played in the playoff or did not play in a BCS title game in 2012 have had the most players drafted?
I would guess Miami's high up on there.
Miami is number 2. Any other guesses?
Number
Wait,
one
did it
is-
play in BCS or college football playoff, but most players drafted? That's the
Yes.
question.
Yes.
Where's
Penn State.
Miami at 52. What was your answer, Ari?
Penn State.
Penn State's number 3 with 44.
Oh!
Ooh.
All right, Grace, get number 1.
Oh gosh. I gotta think about this for a minute.
It's not North Carolina.
Is it? Well, would Iowa be up there too, somewhere in the top 5 or no?
No.
Okay.
Maybe it's
Okay, I'll
because
give you
fresh on my mind.
FSU would have been second.
A&M.
Hold on. FSU would have been second, but they played in the last BCS championship game. So like,
A&M.
nope. A&M, surprisingly, I just have the top 5, so I don't know where A&M was. Number 5.
What do we have? Miami and Penn State?
Yeah, 2 and 3. There's a tie for number 4.
USC.
USC's tied for number 4.
This includes playoff teams, you said?
41. Non-playoff
Yeah, no
teams.
playoff
Non-playoff teams.
That's the point of the question.
Right,
These teams did not play in a playoff.
Florida.
Ding, 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 ding. Number 1 with 64. Miami's number 2 with 52. Penn State has 44. USC has 41. And there's another team tied with USC. And I don't think you guys will get it. Although they were featured prominently in our story, Ari.
Wisconsin.
Nope.
Purdue.
Stanford.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's a good one.
wow.
They had a great run in the early 2010 teens. So
All
there
right.
you go.
Good trivia
These are
question.
hard.
Good job, Mitch.
Okay,
Can I
so
do
we
trivia next week? I'm tired of getting these answers wrong.
yeah, sure.
I'm trying
But
to.
you got to give me the
I'm trying
answer.
All
Yeah,
right.
you got to give me the answer.
I've got a trivia question. It's got-
Are we going to get fired
yeah.
by this trivia question?
I thought
Ari?
about it, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to keep my job for another week. Maybe we can.
We'll take this one, as they say, offline.
Yeah. Maybe we'll vet it and we'll refine it, and then it'll be the reason for you guys to listen next week.
Ari, should I take away the closing duties from you, or you still want in this new 4-person?
I would
world
like
we're
to
in?
say goodbye.
So you would like the closing argument?
How
every
could I
week,
be
so.
clearer for you?
Okay, do your thing, Ari.
Thank you for listening to the latest edition of Stars Matter. We will talk to you next week.